And voila. So we have ourselves some clay here. And as you can see, when you get it, it's not going to be pretty. So we want to take it into our hands and we want to start squishing it up. It's going to feel cold. It's going to feel a little bit sticky. If it's not sticky enough, then you want to take your water and your paintbrush, ta-da, magically appears, and you just want to wet it a little bit. Clay is supposed to be soft, it's supposed to be pliable, so we want it easy to work with. Right now, we're just getting it kind of warmed up and getting all those air bubbles out of it. I'm going to start making it into some sort of a form, kind of a disc shape, and we're going to set it down on the table, and we're going to start rolling with this bad boy. Now, I'm rolling gently here. I'm not applying a lot of pressure. I'm not making a pancake. And I want this to be even all around. So I'm going to periodically flip directions back and forth. What I'm going for is eventually a rectangle here. So I'm kind of going back and forth, making sure that my rectangle doesn't get too skinny, making sure that my rectangle doesn't just go one direction, making sure that it's nice and even all around. I want to make sure my thickness isn't too thin or else it's going to crack. It should be roughly the thickness of my pinky finger. We're going to call that good enough. And we want to make sure that there's not any kind of divots or dents or anything like that. We want an even thickness, or else when it dries, we're going to run into some issues here. Now, I want to make sure that this is about the size of my hand, and then I'm ready to start cutting my rectangle. I've got this big old wooden cutter thing. I like this metal cutter better. There's lots of different tools you can use to cut. You just use whatever you have, whatever's easiest. But I'm going to cut the sides. I'm going to make sure that it is as even as I can. I don't want any angles going wonky. I don't want anything kind of going off to the side. Like that. Don't do that. We want it to be as even as possible, okay? A rectangle has two equal sides and has long sides. We wanted a rectangle, y'all. So I'm going to pick up this thing and give it a little tap, tap, tappy on the sides so it's just really nice and clean on the edges. I want to double check everything's nice and neat, and then I'm going to take this bamboo skewer here, super fancy tool, and I'm going to write my initials on the back. Okay, this first initial step, all these things are going to look exactly the same. So we want to make sure that we have our initials there. Now I'm going to clean up my area a little bit because I'm ready to move on to the sketching. I'm going to use my fancy tool again, and this time I'm going to kind of just sketch out how I want this to be. Remember, I'm making a letter, not just any letter, but I'm making my letters, kind of a personal tile here. So you could pick your first name, you could pick your last name, whichever letter you want to go with, but one from your name. Now, I kind of sketched out some areas where I want some of my other texture details and stuff to go, just kind of mapping out, kind of thinking ahead what I want this whole thing to look like. Once I have my sketch of what I want to do, now I'm going to start creating the H that is going to attach on top of this. I can do this by two ways. I can create my H out of coils, which is what I'm demonstrating here. You want to take a piece of clay, and it's basically making an old-fashioned snake, you know, like the ones you did when you were 5 years old. You want to make sure that it's moist enough. You want to make sure that you are rolling with the palms of your hands, and you want to make sure that you're kind of extending your palms, making sure that it's nice and long. When it is about the thickness of my pinky, then I'm going to cut it to the size that I want, and I'm going to lay it out here. Notice I'm not attaching yet because I kind of want to try out the other one too. I'm going to take my leftover coil, and I'm actually going to turn this into more of a slab piece. Now, a slab is what we just created with this tile. It's just a flat surface, flat piece of clay. So I'm taking my coil, I'm flattening it out, not too flat because again, I want it to be nice and strong, but I'm going to cut it to make sure that it fits my H. Again, to create these little slab pieces here, I'm going to start with a coil. I'm going to roll it in between my hands, then I'm going to roll it onto the table nice and smooth, and then I'm going to make sure that that it's nice and flat and that it is the length that I wanted. Now the reason I chose to go with the slab here is because I think there's going to be more opportunity for adding texture on top of the H. This is going to be a texture tile. It's very, very texture heavy. So if I have my H like this, then I can add some more cool stuff on the H. So let's talk about how to actually attach all these pieces, because this part is extremely important. Whenever you want to attach something in the clay world, you have to do something called slip and score. What I'm doing here is I'm scoring. I'm taking, again, that super fancy bamboo skewer, and I'm just roughing up the area where it's going to be attached. I'm going to do the same on the clay piece that I'm attaching. I'm roughing it up because it's, think of it like Velcro. Okay, the Velcro has a rough side, the other piece has a rough side. Those two rough sides are going to be coming together and going to be clinging to each other. But before we get to that step, we have to use this fancy paintbrush and we have to use this slip. Now, slip is not that fancy. It is just clay dust and water mixed together, but it is basically the glue of the clay world. So I'm going to slab some on my little piece here, and notice I also put some where the clay is going to be going. I want to firmly press those pieces together, making sure it's nice and sticky and gloopy, but I don't want to actually squish my H here, or my piece that it's going to be. But the most important thing here is actually blending these together. So I'm going to take my paintbrush again, and I'm going to go down the side. A little bit of slip is still on there, but what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to blend these two clay pieces together. If I don't do this well, then as this dries, these pieces are going to just literally come apart. They're going to dry and separate from each other. So I want to blend this as much as possible where the clay pieces really fuse together, where one really becomes a part of the other. I don't want any cracks. I just want it really, really well blended, or else I'm going to be very sad later on. The other pieces are really just a repeat of what I just talked about, okay? You want to scratch up both sides, you want to add slip to both sides, and you want to make sure that it is thoroughly blended. So we're going to put this on fast forward here. Now I noticed everything is attached, but my lines in between my H are not blended as much as I would like. So I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to blend those areas. So again, you can't see any cracks, so you can't see where one of my clay pieces ends and where the other one begins. They are completely fused together and just look like basically I cut out a giant H and stuck it on there. I want it nice and smooth, even though I'm going to add all kinds of crazy texture to it later. Ta-da! Now, before I get crazy with the texture, I want to add some holes for some string or something in case I want to hang it up later. Again, with the fancy tools, I'm going to take this straw and I'm going to very carefully press and give it a little twist and leave a nice clean hole there. I do not want this too close to the edge, or else when it dries, it's going to crack or just easily break off. Okay? I want it to kind of be close enough in that it's not going to break, but also I don't want it kind of getting in the way of everything else. Now, as I have been working, my little sketch lines have just disappeared a little bit, and that's okay. But I'm going to put them back in there, kind of map out the little areas of texture I want, because in each one of these areas, I'm just going to kind of play around and experiment and imprint some cool texture into this texture tile. Remember, it's a texture tile. I want to create some cool stuff here. So you can see off to the side, I have all kinds of tools. I got a fork, I've got like that random loopy thing, again, my favorite bamboo skewer. And I'm going to start with it. I'm going to start with the opposite side, not the pokey side. And I'm going to press some little holes into it. Actually, it's, you know what? It's not even holes. It's just these little circle indentions. And I'm just going to keep on going and going and going until I like where it goes, till I like what happens here. And that's literally what I'm going to do with these other areas as well. I'm just experimenting. I would like to say that I had a plan in place as far as exactly what I was going to do in each area. I probably should have, and will probably make you do that as well, but I did not. I just kind of went with it. And so I started playing around with all kinds of different tools. Some of the ways you're supposed to use them, some of the ways you're not supposed to use them. Really, just anything goes. And the nice thing about this is if there's any piece of this that I don't like, I mean, you can't really mess this up, but if you just kind of change your mind and you're like, oh no, I don't really like that, then you just take your finger, you take your tool, and you just kind of smooth it back out and you start over. It's like a great big eraser. It's a wonderful time just to play with different textures. And there you have it. A clay tile that's pretty fun, pretty easy, full of texture and personality.